And now you can't say, I didn't warn you. All right. Well, welcome to the Young Entrepreneur Syndicate on the 15th of July, 2024. Good stuff tonight. I know that most of you have heard before that I come up with a list of topics, just random topics, and I send them out a year in advance to myself, Rachel, and Jim. So whoever's on for that night gets a topic, and whatever you do with it, you get to do with it. And I look at it as a trigger. It's just a trigger to give you a talking point, something to push off of, to get some sort of content out. And this is a topic that I managed to get tonight by whatever fate would have it, and I'm kind of excited. So the topic was go back to your notes. And I was thinking about this. What am I going to talk about with going back to your notes? And this is the first thing that I came up with is this. Sometimes we don't know at the moment we hear something or see something what it means to us. So if you're taking notes on calls, if you're at a seminar, business meetings, you don't record everything, right? You take notes on things that you think are important. And subconsciously, and I honestly believe this, subconsciously, you will write things down that may not be relevant to your situation or your life at that moment in time, but they are relevant in your future. And the only way you're going to come back to that, and sometimes you'll think, man, I heard somebody at some conference say something like this, and I can't get it exactly right, but it left an impression, right? And you come back to that. It might be 10 years later. It might be 3 years later. It might be 3 weeks later. So always keep your notes, number one, but go back to your notes because you will read things, you will trigger memories in your mind that may not have been relevant at the time, but they may contain answers for questions you have today. And I honestly believe that. I've seen it happen in my life countless times, especially when I've gone looking for stuff that I know I've thrown out. So I don't do that as often as I used to. I used to purge all the time. And then I'd go back looking for something and think, why did I get rid of that? And hang on to stuff. You know, if you've got room for it, especially digitally, don't discard it because you can go back to it. So my talk tonight, I followed my own advice and I went back to notes that I made just about a year ago here in another month. You know, I had a major operation that put me out of commission for 3 months. But before I had gotten into that, I had committed to a 4-day seminar with John Maxwell Group, invested a good deal of money, and I was going to invest a good deal of time in it, and I ended up having to do it digitally, and I wasn't in the best of mental, physical, or emotional space when I did it, but I did take good notes. And I've been telling Jim I'm going to at some point get into those notes and bring them to the group. And so tonight's the night. I'm going to download a whole bunch because it was a phenomenal thing. And I only made it through like 6 pages of 24 pages of notes. And I'm just going to download a bunch of stuff for you. But before I start, I want to talk to you first about a very important principle. And this is for your personal life. This is for your business life. This is for your personal relationships. I think this is going to be something. I performed a marriage ceremony for a young couple several years ago. And it's one of those things, you know, the answer is yes. If someone asks you to do something, you say yes. So I've actually performed marriage nuptials for 3 different couples. And this was one. But when I was going through their, you know, the little story, the little prelude to their ceremony, I reminded them of a book in the Bible. It's from Second Kings. Anybody who wants the reference here, it's 2 Kings 6, verse 1 through 7. And a prophet is Elisha is going to rebuild the temple. And it's been destroyed. He wants to go over and do something different. And so they're literally going out to cut down trees to start rebuilding this temple. And the story in Second Kings actually takes place in the Bronze Age. And that's important to note. And I'm going to read this story real quick. And when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. And he cried out and said, Alas, master, for it was borrowed. So the man of God, Elisha, said, Where did it fall? And he showed him the place. So he cut off a stick, threw it in the water, and he made the iron float. And he said, Pick it up for yourself. So he reached out his hand and he took it. Now, what does that have to do with your notes? It has this to do with your notes. When you find yourself floundering in a relationship, in your business, if you feel like you just don't have the drive, the desire, the push, the impetus that you used to have, right? When you were excited about everything, go back to where you last had it. That's the axe head principle. Where was the last place you had that drive, that desire, everything was clicking, you were running on all 8 cylinders and life was good? Where were you? And get yourself back to that place. Mentally, emotionally, what were the triggers? And get yourself back there. The second moral of this story is cry out immediately when you need help. He lost that axe head. He immediately cried out. That's a lesson for all of us today. If you know something's gone awry, you're not on track, ask for help and don't let it get too far down the road because you'll forget it. Remember, your greatest responsibility is to the things that you've borrowed from other people. It's what you owe others that's most important. That's what he said. Alas, master. He wasn't worried that he lost his own axe head. He was worried that he lost something that was borrowed from someone else. And you think about it. How much of our lives have we invested in ourselves? We're actually borrowing other people's energy, their enthusiasm, what they need from us. We borrow their services. We borrow their energy. Whether it's a spouse, whether it's your children, they're on loan to us. And if we start looking at all the people in our lives, if we look at them that they're loaned to us to get us further in life, to get us further in our family, to get us further in our businesses, we will take better care of them. They're not ours. They're not yours to lose. They're not yours to abuse. They're yours because they've been loaned to you. So they should have greater value than your own stuff. And there's an important moral to that story. The next thing is when you go back to that place where you last had it, expect a miracle, because that's what happened. If you go back expecting a miracle, you might not just find the axe head, you'll find other stuff as well. So again, I firmly believe that if you've taken notes on something, you've taken them for a reason, even if your subconscious is the one taking the deep notes, right? Go back to it. Go back to what you wrote down. And here's the other thing. And this was from, I can't remember who it was. Somebody said this, write every day. It captures thought. So if you've got an idea, if you've got just random thoughts that go through your mind, write it down. Capture the thought. That's number one. Capture the thought. It clarifies the thought when you write it down, and it channels the thought. And then if you share that thought with others, it expresses and expands the thought. It all starts with writing it down. So your notes are very important. Whether you're taking them tonight, whether you re-listen to an episode, whether you've gone to a seminar, a business thing, whether you're on a YouTube video, take notes because it will do all those things. Capture, clarify, and channel. And then share it with other people. That's how it becomes something that is yours. It's not just somebody else's idea. It becomes yours when you share it. All right, so to my Maxwell Leadership Conference. If those of you who don't know John Maxwell, look him up. He's an author of over 100 books, almost all of them on leadership and people principles. He has sold 31 million books in 50 languages. This is the master. And he's an absolutely phenomenal guy. It was a pleasure to spend hours upon hours with him. Although I wasn't able to do it in person this time, I can certainly do it again. The invite's open. So here are some takeaways from Maxwell. This is a one-on-one, just Maxwell, John Maxwell, sitting on a stage, talking to people, just talking to people, just like if he was your mentor, your friend. And he went on for hours, and I just wrote down things that resonated with me. So here's from my notes. I'm going to just read through them real quick. And if some of these resonate for you, that's your good takeaway. Here's what happens when you share. Stay in your strength zone. You lose power when you don't have what makes you good at what you do. Stay with it and do what it takes. So stay in your strength zone. Never ask directions from someone who hasn't been there. When do you scale? You scale when the world tells you it's time, when you're better, or when opportunity offers it. And this is a big thing with businesses. And I know that we've got members on here that will be listening to this later, and you start wondering, when do I start investing more money? When do I start gearing up? When do I start, going to physical locations and spending more on this? It's when the world tells you it's time, it's when you're better, or when opportunity offers it. Okay, next. Success is when those that know you the most respect you the most. Success is when those that know you the most respect you the most. And it's interesting, we have family day once a month at our house, where all the grown kids bring all their children over, and we have a big feed and just sit around hanging out. And for whatever reason, my wife started having me share stories of my youth. And I had a colored past. I enjoyed life to the fullest. We'll put it that way. And I've done some dangerous things, and I've done some stupid things, and I've done things I'm not proud of. And we talked about all those things. There's a learning thing in there. So leave room for redemption. When you know people and you want to get the respect, you have to admit that you've made mistakes and that you've overcome them, and that you're a better person because you've made mistakes. Whether those were mistakes in judgment, whether those mistakes in business, whatever it is. So make sure that you're leaving room for redemption with people. And, people deserve as much grace as you've been given. So give other people the grace too. It's not a one and done. If it's a big thing, then absolutely you know when to draw the line. But, people can change. So keep that in mind. Next was ask your way to awareness. Ask your way to awareness. That's the being teachable principle. And those of you who have read my book, The Warpath Alliance, you know that the T in Warpath stands for teachable. You have to be teachable. If you're not asking your way to awareness, you're not teachable. It's one of my important principles. So taking advice is different than practicing advice. That's one of my favorites. And this was a good one. If you're good, any brand will do. If you're bad, no brand will save you. You think about that. We talk on this in the syndicate about your branding a lot. Your personal brand, your business brand. And if you're good, any brand will do. So keep that in mind. Just do what you're good at, right? But if you're bad, no brand will save you. So just good, solid business principles. Priorities. Where do you spend your time? And know what to do first. Know what to do first with your time. Don't be a reservoir, be a river. And that's just being selfless. Again, that's priorities. The one just before, where do you spend your time? That's one of the P in Warpath is there. Warpath, selfless is another one. And this was one I really liked, and I know other people have done this. I've heard it before. Don't pay your kids to do chores. Chores are being part of the family. That gets to the work ethic. Don't pay your kids to do chores. Chores are what family members do to be a part of the family. If you want to pay them for something, pay them to read books. Pay them to read books. If they tell you they've read another book, pay them for that. It will be of much more value to both of you than paying them to mow the lawn or take out the trash. Next, it's easier to go from failure to success than from excuse to excuse. Think about that. It's easier to go from failure to success than from excuse to excuse. So the next one, I look down on people who look down on people. And that is one of my favorites. My personal mission statement is I want to empower ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. That is my personal mission statement. So I like the ordinary, going from ordinary to extraordinary. So, looking down on people, it's not cool for me. Being humble is, again, in Warpath, humble is the H. So that resonated with me as well. Be consistent every day, not all day. And that is, again, the thing that goes against work ethic is being a workaholic. So be consistent every day, but not all day. That's just wise words. Consistency beats intensity. Just be consistent. You don't have to run the marathon or run the sprint 8 hours of your day, or 10 or 12 or 14. Just be consistent. And this one I really liked. It's what you learn after you know. Excuse me. It's what you learn after you know it all that matters. So that's a fun one, right? It's what you learn after you know it all is what matters. Alex jumped on. Good to see him here. I know that he had an issue earlier today. So that's John Maxwell. Those were my takeaways from a whole probably 4 hours with John Maxwell. Something in there has to resonate because it was important enough for me to write down. We also heard from an author, Juliet Funt, who's an author of a book called A Minute to Think. And her whole premise here was a lot of accomplished people missed the ride. And if you're seeing some themes of things that were important to me, it's don't miss the ride, right? She says, get off of autopilot and find the white space. And your white space is not time for daydreaming, meditation, or necessarily mindful focus. You need space, just open space. It's like oxygen. Think about that. If we just cram our days full of do, we've got no oxygen in there for creativity, for balance, for sanity, for ease, and for meaning. So you can't just book all that space up to do. You need to have oxygen in there. And that oxygen is room to just be creative, room to breathe. Okay. She has 4 drivers of professional overload. So drive is one thing, overdrive is the bad thing. Number 2, excellence is one thing, perfection is the bad thing. And I've always said that. Don't ever let perfection get in the way of excellence. That's been one of my mottos my entire adult life. Number 3, information versus being hyper indulgent. It's good to know what's going on in the world, right? That's why we spend time on social media or on the news apps, getting that stuff. It's good to know that, but how much of that information is necessary for you? How much do you need to know? And where are you going to set your boundaries? And then lastly, she said, activity versus frenzy. There's a difference between activity and frenzy. And here's an example you can all relate to, because I know you've all watched the assassination attempt probably 50 times by now on your phone and your news threads and everything else. And I know that things that stood out to me that were important, I know I talked to Taylor about this yesterday, was watching the one Secret Service agent trying 3 different times to holster her weapon. I don't know if you saw that. She was so frantic, she couldn't get her handgun back in its holster. And it just looked like she was incompetent, number 1. She looked frustrated, but that's the difference between activity and frenzy. And people see it. If you are being active, that's good. If you're being frenzied, fanatic, frantic, people notice. So be in charge, be in control. So activity versus frenzy. And that was a great application we saw yesterday, well, from Saturday. Next, practice a reductive mindset. What's a reductive mindset? What can you let go of? All right. And you have to decide where is good enough. When you're pushing in, pushing hard, where is good enough? because you have to set goals, but you also have to set boundaries. So where is good enough? What do you truly need to know? In order to get better at whatever it is you're doing, what is it you truly need to know to get that next level? Isolate what that is and push into that. Instead of just getting all this random information from all these different sources, what is it you need to know and push in on that? There, believe me, you can learn anything on YouTube, on Google, whatever platforms you're on, you can find the answers to anything. But what is it you need to know? Focus on that first. What deserves your attention? And if you think about that, your time being the most valuable commodity you have, what deserves your attention with that time? And that should be your priority. And it might be family. I will tell you that several years ago, I was the point person on the mayor's homeless task force. We all know homelessness it doesn't matter what size city you're in, homelessness is a big deal. So we're dealing with it here in our community. And we're like, well, what are the real things? What are we going to do? So I chaired a committee, and I loaded it up with people who work with the homeless. I loaded it up with pastors. I loaded it up with government people. And I spent several months interviewing people, saying how, finding out how the systems all worked together, where they didn't work, and what the causes of homelessness were. And they're varied, obviously. And then I wrote a report, and it made a whole lot of people really mad because I was holding people accountable, and it wasn't the government. It was the people who were getting the money, the grant money, and they weren't doing their jobs. I mean, that was the long and the short of it. Was the people who were in charge of making life better for these people were not doing their jobs. And I was vilified for that. But it turns out, then I ended up with a whole bunch of support. As years went on, it turned out that other people in other cities were finding the same conclusions that our report came out with. And now I'm seeing it's raising its head again in my community. And I pulled all my documentation out, all my research, and I've got stacks, literally stacks of research, people I'd interviewed, and government documents, the whole works. And I thought, I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to readdress it, because they're just rehashing the same old thing. And it's still sitting in a pile on my desk. And I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. That was over a month ago. I was going to, write letters to the editor. I was going to go back to the mayor. I was going to say, what are we doing? We're going down this same road again. And then I thought, does it deserve my attention? I did what I could do. I passed the information on to the people that needed it. And I stepped back because that was my job. And I could have injected myself back into that conversation, back into that equation, and I would have been going down that rat hole all over again. And I chose not to do it. And that's a hard thing. Could I make a difference? Possibly. It didn't make a difference the last time, right? So I had to make a choice. And sometimes your choices are not that easy. You have to drill down a little bit and say, what deserves my attention? What deserves my time? And then don't waste it. That's time I could spend with my family. It's time I can spend helping other people with their businesses. So, making those choices is tough, but you do it. Okay, next. And this again is still from A Minute to Think. High value work. High value work is revenue, reward, reputation, and readiness. Right? Readiness. What you're doing right now, this is high value work. You're listening to stuff that can help you with your performance and your job and your lives. The thieves are panicking, pandering. Pandering can be to clients, right? Spending too much time with clients that you've already sold or that aren't going to be sold, but you just want to keep making conversation. Don't pander. Procedure is a thief. How much red tape is in your life? How much red tape is in the processes of your business? And then padding. Padding is too many emails, too much follow-up. So you need to be able to reduce the thieves. Stop pandering, get your procedures down, stop padding, and stop panicking, and take charge of your high-value work, where revenue is concerned, where your rewards are concerned, and that includes time, where your reputation is concerned, and your readiness. That's your professional resources. And then trap yourself in a promise. I am done for today. It's okay to be done for today. And I've said this 100 times before, maybe not all to you, but I can tell you the hardest part about being your own boss, and especially working from home, is knowing when to stop, because the work's always there. Your home office is always there. You can go up, you can stay in it for hours. It's always there. You need to know when to stop and just say, I am done for the day. It might be at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, but know when to say you're done and then hold yourself to it. I had takeaways from James Clear, who is another keynote speaker. He's the author of Atomic Habits. I'm sure most of you have read that. I'm not going to go through my takeaways from him. Most of it you can find in his book, but there were new ones, new insights. Being an architect of your habits or be a victim of them. One of my favorite takeaways. I won't go into the rest of his in the interest of time. Takeaways from Ryan Leake, who wrote Leveling Up. We are not born with a fear of failure. And I think I mentioned this on a previous call. It is not one of the innate fears that we have. Fear of failure or fear of public speaking. Those are things we learn. So just put that in the back of your mind. If you've got fear of failure, it's something you've picked up along the way, because it's not a natural tendency. Even playing it safe is risky. I knew that from my military days. You can't play it safe. Playing it safe is a risk in and of itself. Think of that in the political field and the world view of where we are with international crisis and stuff like that. You can't play it safe because that's risky. Risk is irrelevant if you don't try. Understanding why people fail gives us a strategy to experience failure less. So looking at why businesses fail, look at why other people have failed. Have they become workaholics? Did they give up control of their businesses? Why did they fail? Because that'll keep us from following suit in that as well. I like this. Failure loses its punch in community. You think about that. You're free to fail in front of us in this group. It's okay to say, I screwed up. I'm not where I wanted to be. Failure is okay because it doesn't have sting if you're in a community of people who have failed themselves. And that's what Jim and I have said. We paid the dummy tax, right? You don't have to go through that. We've already done it. So it loses its punch in community. So stay plugged in. Failure loses its grip when you keep moving forward. So it's one thing to fail. It's another thing to fail and keep moving beyond that. You can stop and say, oh man, that just didn't work out. And I can say in network marketing, I saw that all the time. People would say, oh, somebody told me no, or oh, this didn't work out. And they stop moving instead of just keep moving forward through that failure. Chasing failure takes you further than chasing success ever could. And that almost seems like a paradox. But if you think about it, success is built on failure. So chasing failure takes you further than chasing success ever could. I'd never heard it put that way, but it resonated. And then here's a question. What would you do if you know you could not fail? What is it you would do if you know you couldn't fail? And then here are the 4 things that Ryan Leake says why people fail. 1, poor planning. 2, poor execution. 3, poor people skills. And 4, poor habits. And those are all 4 things that we deal with consistently. You look back on the 100+ episodes that we've got listed here and just look at the topic titles, and they will fall under one of those 4 categories. So poor planning, poor execution, poor people skills, or poor habits. Work on those things. Always listen, take the stairs. And what he means by that is don't take the easy way. Take the hard way and pick up the trash, because leaders model. Pick up the trash. And here's his takeaway was the ideal isn't coming. The ideal is here right now. So I also had having gone through those pages of notes, I had from Allie Love, who was one of the original Peloton instructors. Phenomenal talk and some great takeaways from her. We'll save some of that for a message another night. But again, if you're taking notes, go back to your notes. You're always going to find a nugget in there that will resonate with a problem or a question that you've got going on today. There's a reason you go to those seminars. There's a reason you plug into YouTube videos. There's a reason you do Zoom calls. There's always a reason for it, but it may not be for that instant in time. It might be tools in your tool chest, or in this case, it might be money in the bank, just sitting there waiting for you to draw the interest on it. So that's it. I'm going to wrap. That was a little bit longer by 5 minutes than I'd expected, but I hope you got a little something out of it. I will entertain questions or comments. Be respectful of everybody's time. It's midsummer and everyone's been hectic and going, but welcome a takeaway or two. Jim Spilson, anything resonate with you tonight?
A lot of it did. I took a lot of notes. A lot of that I've heard before and love. So wrote them down again and need to refresh regularly.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, most of this isn't new. We've read it in books and that sort of thing, but there's a reason we take the notes. So going back to the notes is important. Thanks for that. Taylor, I see your hands up. What do you got?
Howdy.
Howdy do.
Just making dinner. Okay, this was an awesome topic, and I had to text the whole group like 10 minutes in because I just want everybody to hear it, and I definitely need to. I was driving the whole time, so I need to listen again and take notes. But okay, there was a little bit about humility, and it really stood out to me. I think we all, well, I naturally want not to fail. And so I loved what you said about how it's so much like you have cushion in a community. So it's failure doesn't feel like failure. It just feels like part of the adventure. You know, you have people to lift you up. But I was also thinking of something that my husband has often said in his career, and that is the minute you think you know it all is the minute that you failed. And like that's part of the wonder of what we do, right? Is exploring and learning along the way. So just thank you for that reminder. There was something else, but I seem to have lost it. So I'll raise my hand again if I get it.
All right. Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
You know, and for those of you who don't know, thinking you know it all is not just one of those things always a know-it-all. Taylor's husband is in search and rescue and law enforcement. So if you think you know it all and you let your guard down for 1 minute, just 1 minute or 1 second, it literally can be life or death. And I don't know if any of you out there have ever done ride-alongs with law enforcement. I've been with my son-in-law on ride-alongs, and it's scary. It can be terrifying. And out here in Montana, they don't have 2 officers. They don't have backup. They go out solo. And I remember once when Spencer was in Eastern Montana and one of the drug capitals of the world, running, on the Keystone Pipeline, and, being out 30 miles from nowhere and pulling over 2 vehicles, right? 2 people stopped and having to do a check. And there's nobody around. There is literally nobody around to call for help. You're it. So thinking you have it all under control, thinking you know everything, that it can be literally a life and death thing for your business or for your physical life. Taylor, do you have your hand up again?
It came back to me.
Go ahead.
Okay, this whole idea of taking notes, my brain automatically threw its own little twist on that. I completely agree. Like taking notes is amazing, but also my thought was take note of your successes as well. Like, take note of what you love about the adventure, take note of the good things that happen, because I know you gave a biblical reference, and there's a lot of references in that book about, like, remember what I have done for you, you know? So I think taking notes is amazing, and taking notes is also amazing for remembering where you have been, remembering where you've come from. And oh, I've got a low battery. Anyway, so for me, it's like, take notes so that you can also remember.
That's a good point. And unless someone else has something else, I'm going to close with that, because Taylor, the talk tonight was go back to your notes, but you can't go back to notes you've not taken, number one. So it begs the question, right? You have to take the notes first. And chronicling your successes and your failures, I think is very important in today's day and age. If we are going to be teachers, if we're going to be leaders in whatever industry we are in, we need to be chronicling, taking note of what it is we've done, what it is we're doing, what we failed at, and how to do it better. And there's a book in everyone here. Jim, Alex, Taylor, there's a book ready to be written, waiting to be written about what you've learned in your life. There is. Somebody needs to hear it. It may just be your kids and your family, your posterity, but you have stuff that people need to know. Where are you going to get that information? Where are you going to get the raw materials for writing that book? Your notes, your successes, your failures, your dreams, what scared you, how you overcame that. And, there's Mike Fallotta out there who's made it a business to write people's stories for them, to write books, to get them published. That's how Rachel and Jim and several others, he's helped hundreds now. There's a book in each of you. And if you're not paying attention to your life and what's happening in it and making notations of that, you're robbing yourself of future revenue and a future resource. And mostly, you're robbing the future of your accomplishments. So every one of you have that in you. You've got a book to write. So start doing the notes. And remember, I started this off with when you write it down, it channels the thought, and then you share it with others, and it expresses and expands the thought. So Taylor, thanks for that, because you've now brought it full circle right back to where I began with this. And that's a good place to stop. Unless anyone else has got anything else, I'm going to let you all go for the night. We'll call it a wrap. Thanks for being here, and see you next time.
Thanks, Rod.
You bet. You're welcome. Always a pleasure.